Step into the boardroom floor, pipeline metrics, deal report. Every number speaks the truth, every chart has earned its name. No more guesswork, no more bluffing, coverage strong, momentum's nothing.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from or what time you are joining us even after. I'm Dan Griffith. This is our weekly Seriously Don't Do That live event, and I appreciate you joining us and taking some time from your day. Hopefully today we will be able to share some things that will help you in your journey as a founder or revenue leader in businesses that are software and high tech. Our session today is on board-ready revenue. And if you've ever walked into a board meeting hoping that nobody asked you the hard questions about your pipeline, this session is absolutely for you. And I will say, in my career, I've done that a number of times. That's why we talk about seriously don't do that, because these are things that I've seen or many times things that I've done that I want you to learn from to help you in your journey. So I'm Dan Griffith. If you don't know who I am, check me out on whatever platform you're joining us on, YouTube, LinkedIn, or X. I work with, like I said before, software and tech-enabled service companies that call on healthcare, banking, financial services, and insurance, and help them scale and grow, whether they are entering a new market like the US market or are just growing in their market. Many times we're engaging at an inflection point after funding or after hitting a revenue goal and proceeding to the next goal. Would love to talk with you about your specific situation. We'll share some things at the end of the call where you can engage with us. So I want to start today's call with a discovery call that I did recently with a health tech founder. Super smart guy. That's the wonderful thing about what we do at Greater Gain Group is get to deal with folks that, and I say get to deal, I get to work with people that are very smart, very accomplished, and have achieved great heights in their profession and are either embarking on their journey or growing on their journey as they bring whatever they've put together to the world. So this guy, no exception, 7 years in business, about $5 million invested in the business, and really a solid leading platform. Obviously, it had some initial success, but we're really kind of struggling along at that $1 million to $2 million range, not really able to break through that. And like I said, everything looked great on the surface. But when I asked him, as part of kind of our call, I asked him about how he keeps his board updated on the progress in the business. And he paused and said, I just wing it. And then I really wanted to say, seriously, don't do that. But I didn't. However, you don't want to do that. And in my head, I thought, okay, this is a $5 million car with no dashboard and no steering wheel, which, yes, I know we're in the age of AI-driven cars, but with no dashboard and no steering wheel, it was going to be swerving all over the road and end up probably having an accident. Here's what struck me about what he said, though. He did have the courage to admit that he didn't know, which I thought was great, because I think that's often the times where transformation begins. And as I was thinking about the call, I thought, boy, this really fits well into what we've been talking about over the last month, which is don't skip the foundations, because revenue visibility really is the foundation that makes everything else within your company possible. You really can't build a scalable revenue engine if you don't know what is working, and obviously on the flip side of that, what isn't working. So most founders think they need better presentation skills for board meetings. I was meeting with a client, not a client, but a mentee in a group that I do some mentoring for, after he had made a pitch presentation. And we were just talking about it, and I asked him, well, what do you think went well? And he kind of paused and said, I don't normally think about what went well. I was used to getting feedback on what went wrong, which I said, no, you obviously need to think about what goes well in a presentation and then what was impactful in that presentation. And I think as most founders, revenue leaders that are presenting either to board or investors, they think about more of the mechanics of what do my slides look, what do I have on my slides, how am I going to talk through it? And they do a lot of preparation, and they think that a better presentation is related to more professional looking slides or smoother talking points. But in reality, the real problem is what underlies that presentation, which is your data infrastructure. So when your go-to-market foundation is solid, board conversations then shift from defensive explanations to more strategic planning. Instead of why did we miss this target, it becomes here's what we're doubling down on. I like to use an example. Early on in my career, I worked in a lot of large organizations, and I think of board presentations being analogous to a division, maybe presenting their results. And I always remember, as I sat in on these presentations, and even as I did these presentations, there was such a focus on numbers, but not the numbers that you think, not necessarily on sales production. It was all about number of calls made, number of connections made, number of trade show booth scans, number of visits to website, all things that we would call vanity metrics, but nothing really tied to the effectiveness and the efficiency of the sales pipeline. And we'll talk some more about that later. But again, as a founder, revenue leader, it's not presentation skills. It's not slick slides. It's not talking points. It's really about the infrastructure, the foundations that you have underlying what you're reporting that really makes a great board presentation. So I want to talk about 4 mistakes and then 4 fixes for those mistakes today. So mistake 1 is thinking that, quote, we're growing is enough. Your board doesn't want to hear how busy you are. Again, I'm sure that's great if you're telling them how busy you are and you're using numbers, but ultimately they want to see where revenue is coming from, what's moving, and then what you're going to do about things that are stuck. So the fix to me is simple. And I actually had somebody on LinkedIn ask me this week, I think it was Derek, and I apologize if I didn't remember the name, but they asked me, okay, what are the things you should focus on? So for whomever commented that and whoever was interested in that, 3 numbers weekly, pipeline coverage. Okay, so that's typically 3x of what your quarterly target is. And that's a pretty standard number. I would say that a lot of times companies that we're engaged with, we can bring that number down a little bit. And that doesn't have anything necessarily to do with something magical that we're doing. It has a lot more to do with what are we letting into the pipeline? Because once something that is in the pipeline, we want to have a pretty good surety that that's going to close before we even allow it into the pipeline. But 3x your quarterly target, obviously 3x your annual target as well. So first, pipeline coverage. Second, velocity, days from qualified lead to close. That would be, we would call that sales cycles. But we want to be tracking that and making sure that that is going down and that we're doing what we can to compact that. We talk a lot with our clients about parallel processes, especially when you're dealing with healthcare, banking, financial services, insurance, super long sales cycles. So a lot of those things we want to be able to run in parallel to bring that cycle down some. So second, velocity. And then third, win rate by source. Okay, we sometimes call that attribution. And I would say if you can't answer pipeline coverage, velocity, and win rate by source in 30 seconds, you're really not ready for your next board call. So that's the first mistake. Second mistake is waiting for them to ask the hard questions. If you wait for the board to ask, you've already lost your credibility. So did a lot of work early on in my career, and I still have friends that do some crisis public relations, and that has become a even, I guess, more needed. I'll just say more needed in today's world, where you've got so much media out there. Everybody's got a camera, everybody's got a phone. But one of the kind of the tenets of crisis public relation is, get the bad news out early, right? And I think sometimes, I know in my career in sales, also, I think in working with boards and with investors, with our clients, the tendency is to kind of hide the bad news in something else. But most board members, or at least one of your board members, is probably going to be savvy enough to ask you the hard questions. So I always tell our clients, lead with what's broken. So for instance, if your demo to close rate dropped to 12% last month, I'm going to talk about here's why, here's what we're testing. So boards respect that approach, and really expect founders to kind of see around corners and own their own challenges. Was fortunate enough to work in a company that hyper scaled over 3 years from below 10 million to almost 150 million. And it was very interesting. I think one of the things that I saw in that company was looking at problems and making sure we address those quickly, even before we got to a board meeting. But tracking those numbers that we talked about in mistake one are really, really important, and they can help you address those hard questions early. So mistake 3 is confusing activity with progress. So nobody cares that you sent 500 LinkedIn messages and you had 47 discovery calls. Great. How many deals move forward? Capital efficient growth means knowing what to cut before you run out of cash. And that really, if you don't know what's contributing to your progress, you're not going to know what you need to cut. And again, I'm not telling anybody today that they need to cut anything. I'm just saying, if you're going to run a marathon and you're getting on a treadmill is not going to get you from point A to point B. That sounds like some very convoluted advice, but you've got to be moving forward, and you've got to understand what's holding you back. So really taking a critical eye and looking at, we'll call it your marketing channels, and seeing what's efficient and effective and doubling down on that, and what isn't, and getting rid of it is important. We do a lot of that with our customers when we help them build a marketing engine. And there is a lot of trial and error in there, but you should be able to attribute you should be able to say, okay, these are our best source of leads. And these are what convert. I call them high value expressions of interest. For a lot of our clients, it's 3: request a demo, request a meeting, request pricing. But that's not always true about everybody. But you definitely want to know, though, what is contributing to closed deals. So I call that the lead origin story. Every opportunity really needs one. And then you need to have that defined with the next step and ownership. Your board wants proof that marketing spend turns into pipeline, and pipeline turns into revenue. That's why we talk a lot about lead to opportunity to close. But you want to make sure that spend is capital efficient, number one. So meaning that you're not spending too much on it. But number 2 is you want to get your return on the investment. So here's the key insight that I want to leave with you. Dashboards don't need to be fancy. They need to be trusted. And we'll just say that data as a whole in your organization doesn't need to be fancy, just needs to be trusted. And start somewhere. Start with your spreadsheet, right? I work with a lot of companies that either don't have a CRM or have a CRM that's just a total mess. By the way, we can help you clean that up. But start somewhere and just make sure that you've got trusted numbers. If you're pulling it from a bunch of different sources and hoping they reconcile, you're probably guessing instead of knowing. So again, I thought I was going to give you 4 fixes. I think there was a 4th one in there. I probably just didn't make a slide for that. But yeah, so, those 3 fixes I think will help you as you think about your board, think about growing revenue, and think about building your foundations strong. So next week, we will move into a new month. Believe it or not, it's already October. And we're going to dive into one of the most expensive mistakes I see founders making, which is hiring BDRs. Now, I know BDRs, you're going to be all over me about this. However, hopefully you'll listen to everything, because I'm not saying that we need to eliminate BDRs. I'm just saying we need to think about hiring BDRs and why we're doing it. Many times I'll see BDRs being hired and there is no system for them to execute. And that is certainly a disaster. And we would say, seriously, don't do that. So I'll share a story of 993 unheard voicemails that changed how I think about outbound forever, plus the real math on why the average 120,000 BDR investment takes 3 to 5 months to ramp, with less than 12% of hitting quota in regulated markets. What I'll show you is the AE first alternative that's faster to ROI, easier to manage, and more effective at your stage, plus exactly what to build before you even think about adding headcount. If you're considering hiring your first BDR or wondering why your current one isn't working, this session will be for you. So seriously, don't hire that new BDR until you watch next week's section. It could save you 6 figures and get you much better results. So here's the bottom line on today. Board confidence comes from knowing your numbers, not hoping they're right. Q4 is when boards expect cuts, focus, and ARR clarity. If you can't explain where revenue is coming from, you're probably flying blind into 2026. If you do want to stop winging it and start walking into board meetings with confidence, request our growth readiness audit by commenting audit on whatever platform you're joining us on, or you can book a discovery call using the link in the description. Because when your GTM foundation is solid, board meetings become strategy sessions instead of interrogations. Till next week, this is Dan Griffith wishing you a great day.